The hardest part isn't hearing someone call you worthless. It's realizing you believe them. The rain fell in silver sheets across the airport drop-off lane, turning the glowing headlights into blurred ribbons of light. Liam Carter stood motionless beneath the storm, his tailored navy coat soaked through, his neatly combed dark hair plastered against his forehead, completely oblivious to the cold. Travelers hurried around him, dragging rolling suitcases through shallow puddles, eager to escape the weather, but he couldn't move. 50 feet away, Ethan Brooks stood beside the security entrance with a single carry-on bag resting against his leg. The overhead departures board flickered softly above him, while passengers drifted past, without noticing the quiet heartbreak unfolding between two strangers who had once shared everything. Ethan looked different now. His shoulders were straighter. His hazel eyes no longer searched the room for permission to exist. Even the gentle smile he offered the airline employee carried a quiet confidence Liam had never seen before. It hurt because Liam knew exactly when that version of Ethan had disappeared. He had been the one who buried it. "Please," Liam called, his voice cracking just enough to surprise himself. Ethan stopped walking but didn't turn around immediately. The silence between them stretched longer than any argument they had ever had. Finally, Ethan looked back over his shoulder, calm and unreadable. Liam swallowed hard. Every speech he had rehearsed during the 6-hour flight dissolved into nothing. Every excuse sounded pathetic now. Every explanation felt selfish. "Don't leave," he managed to whisper. Ethan studied him for a long moment, not with anger, not even with resentment, but with the quiet distance reserved for someone who had become a chapter instead of a future. "You already let me go," Ethan answered softly. "You just didn't notice until I was gone." Those words settled heavier than the rain. Liam felt them somewhere deep beneath his ribs, in the place where regret had been growing for months without mercy. 8 months earlier, he would have dismissed a sentence like that as unnecessary drama. He would have rolled his eyes, apologized half-heartedly, and returned to answering emails that somehow always seemed more important than the man waiting for him at home. Back then, success measured itself in promotions, billable hours, and expensive watches. Love had quietly become another item on a calendar that could always be postponed until tomorrow. Ethan never complained loudly. That had been the tragedy. He celebrated Liam's victories with homemade dinners after 12-hour workdays. He left encouraging notes inside briefcases that were often returned unopened. He remembered birthdays Liam forgot, watered the dying plants Liam insisted they keep, and laughed at jokes that weren't funny simply because he wanted the apartment to feel warm after another exhausting evening. Little by little, Ethan became the invisible gravity holding their life together, so constant that Liam stopped seeing it altogether. The frightening thing about losing someone isn't the moment they walk away. It's discovering how many pieces of your ordinary life quietly belong to them all along. And by the time you finally notice the emptiness, they've already learned how to live without you. 8 months earlier, the apartment still smelled like fresh coffee every morning because Ethan insisted that no one should begin the day with bitterness, even after another late night. Sunlight spilled across the hardwood floor, warming the tiny breakfast table they had found at a weekend flea market for less than $100. Ethan had laughed all afternoon while sanding the scratches away, proudly calling it the best investment they had ever made. Liam barely remembered that afternoon anymore. At the time, he had answered work emails while Ethan painted the table alone, humming softly to himself as if creating a home was something worth celebrating. Their lives had slowly divided without either of them announcing it. Liam measured his weeks by meetings, deadlines, and court appearances. Ethan measured his by gallery submissions, grocery lists, and wondering whether they would actually eat dinner together before 10 o'clock. Whenever friends asked how they were doing, both of them smiled and answered, "Busy." It was easier than explaining the silence that had quietly settled between them. Ethan always believed love lived inside ordinary moments. Folding laundry together while an old movie played in the background. Sharing takeout on the living room floor because neither of them felt like cooking. Walking through the neighborhood after sunset with paper cups of hot chocolate during the first cold weekend of November. Liam used to love those moments too. Somewhere along the way, he convinced himself they could wait until life became less demanding. Unfortunately, life never asked permission before becoming even busier. Every postponed dinner became another canceled promise. Every missed conversation became another unopened door. Ethan never demanded grand gestures. He simply wanted to feel chosen. One Friday evening, Ethan stood in the kitchen arranging 2 plates of homemade pasta while checking the clock every few minutes. A single candle flickered in the middle of the table, not because it was a special occasion, but because he believed small efforts kept relationships alive. By 9:30, the food had gone cold. At 10:15, Liam finally walked through the front door, still wearing his suit jacket with his phone pressed against his ear. He pointed toward the dining table, silently signaling that Ethan should wait another minute. 1 minute became 20. By the time Liam ended the call, Ethan had quietly packed the untouched dinner into plastic containers. "I am sorry," Liam sighed while loosening his tie. "Today was impossible." Ethan smiled gently. "You have said that every Friday this month." Liam rubbed his temples, already exhausted before the conversation had truly begun. "Can we please not do this tonight?" Ethan hesitated before speaking again. "I am not asking for flowers or expensive vacations. I just miss you." Liam stared toward the dark television screen instead of meeting Ethan's eyes. "You know I am doing all of this for us." Ethan nodded slowly, although the answer no longer comforted him. "I know you believe that." Those words lingered in the room long after the conversation ended. Neither of them realized they had crossed another invisible line that evening. Love rarely disappears in one dramatic moment. More often, it fades beneath thousands of tiny disappointments that seem insignificant on their own, until one day the distance between 2 people feels wider than the country itself, and neither of them can remember exactly where the first step apart began. The argument that finally shattered everything arrived on an ordinary Tuesday, the kind of gray afternoon that usually disappeared from memory. Ethan had spent the morning preparing for an interview with a respected illustration studio in Seattle, an opportunity he had quietly earned after months of late-night sketching while Liam worked across the apartment with noise-canceling headphones on. He had not mentioned the interview yet. Part of him wanted to share the news over dinner, hoping they could celebrate together like they used to. He even stopped by their favorite bakery on the way home and picked up 2 slices of chocolate cake, smiling to himself because Liam had always claimed dessert tasted better on weekdays than weekends. By the time Ethan unlocked the apartment door, the cakes had shifted slightly inside the small white box, but he did not mind. Some things did not need to be perfect to be meaningful. The living room lights were already on. Liam sat at the dining table surrounded by legal documents, his laptop open, 2 phones buzzing every few minutes. Without looking up, he simply asked, "Did you remember to pick up my dry cleaning?" Ethan paused. "I forgot. I went somewhere important after lunch." Liam exhaled sharply, finally lifting his eyes. "Seriously? It takes 5 minutes." Ethan carefully placed the bakery box on the counter. "I had an interview today." Liam blinked once before returning to his screen. "That is nice." Ethan waited, expecting another question that never came. Instead, Liam continued typing. "How did it go?" he asked almost absent-mindedly several seconds later, his attention still fixed on the contract in front of him. Ethan forced a small smile. "I think it went really well." "Good," Liam answered. "Can you call the cleaners before they close?" Something inside Ethan quietly cracked. He looked at the untouched cake box and suddenly felt embarrassed for believing today might matter to someone besides himself. He walked into the kitchen, unpacked the plates, and stood silently at the sink while the faucet ran longer than necessary. Liam noticed the silence only after another email arrived with unexpected problems from a demanding client. Frustration that had nothing to do with Ethan began overflowing into the room. "Why are you acting like this?" Liam asked impatiently. Ethan turned around slowly. "Because I wanted you to be happy for me." Liam leaned back in his chair, exhausted beyond reason. "Ethan, not everything has to become emotional." Ethan stared at him. "I only wanted 5 minutes." Liam laughed once, not because anything was funny, but because stress had worn away his patience. 5 minutes? You always need reassurance. You always need attention. Do you know how exhausting that is? Ethan lowered his eyes, saying nothing. The silence irritated Liam even more. The words escaped before thought had any chance to stop them. "Sometimes I honestly wonder what you even contribute around here." Ethan looked up slowly, disbelief replacing hurt. Liam continued, driven by anger instead of truth. "You are so focused on feelings that you never notice how hard everyone else is working." Another painful silence filled the apartment. Then came the sentence Liam would replay in his mind every single day afterward. "Sometimes," he said coldly, "I think you are worthless." The room became impossibly still. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to disappear. Ethan did not cry. He did not argue. He simply looked at Liam with an expression neither angry nor heartbroken, only deeply tired, as though he had finally reached the end of carrying something far heavier than love was ever meant to be. Ethan bent down, picked up the small white bakery box, and quietly placed it inside the refrigerator as though it still belonged to a celebration that had simply been postponed. Then he walked into the bedroom without another word. Liam remained at the dining table, his pulse slowly settling as the adrenaline of the argument faded. He rubbed both hands across his face and stared at the legal documents in front of him, but every sentence blurred together. He told himself he had only spoken out of stress. Everyone said things they did not mean. Tomorrow they would apologize, eat breakfast together, and move on like they always did. That was how relationships worked, was not it? 20 minutes later, the apartment was unnaturally quiet. No music drifted from Ethan's studio corner. No gentle humming came from the kitchen. Liam glanced toward the hallway, expecting Ethan to emerge carrying 2 mugs of tea like he often did after disagreements. Instead, the bedroom door remained closed. He almost knocked. Almost. His phone buzzed again before he could stand, and another urgent client demanded immediate attention. By the time he finished the call, midnight had arrived. Exhausted, Liam opened the bedroom door expecting to find Ethan asleep. The bed was neatly made. Half of the closet stood empty. The sketchbooks that usually covered the desk were gone. So was the framed photograph from their trip to Maine, the one where Ethan had laughed so hard his eyes nearly disappeared. Liam frowned, convincing himself Ethan had probably gone to stay with a friend for the night. The next morning, the apartment felt strangely hollow. The coffee maker remained silent. There was no handwritten note on the refrigerator reminding Liam to eat lunch. Even the air seemed different, missing the faint scent of cedar and vanilla that always lingered after Ethan lit his favorite candle. Liam opened the refrigerator to grab orange juice and noticed the bakery box. Curious, he lifted the lid. Inside sat 2 untouched slices of chocolate cake with tiny decorations that read, "Congratulations." Beneath the box rested a folded envelope with his name written in Ethan's familiar handwriting. Liam unfolded it carefully. There were only 3 short sentences. "I hope your work brings you everything you chose over us. I finally realized that love cannot survive where respect has already left. Please do not look for me until you understand the difference." Liam read the note again, then a third time. His first instinct was irritation. Ethan was overreacting. They had argued before. Couples said hurtful things. Surely this did not mean the relationship was over. He reached for his phone and sent a simple message. "Can we talk tonight?" The reply never came. An hour later, he tried calling. Straight to voicemail. By lunchtime, he opened every social media app they both used. Ethan's profile pictures were still there, but new posts had disappeared. Mutual friends politely answered that they had not heard from him, although one hesitation in a conversation made Liam suspect someone knew more than they were willing to say. Days slipped into a week. The apartment grew cleaner because nothing was ever out of place anymore. No sketch pencils rolled beneath the couch. No oversized sweaters hung over dining chairs. No quiet laughter floated in from the balcony while someone watered the plants. Liam had spent years believing success meant building the perfect career. Now he walked through perfectly organized rooms that echoed with an emptiness no promotion could possibly fill, and for the first time, he began wondering whether the most important thing he had ever built had quietly packed one suitcase and walked away while he was still convinced there would always be another tomorrow. The second week without Ethan arrived so quietly that Liam almost missed it until Saturday morning came, and there was no grocery list taped to the refrigerator. For years, Ethan had organized their weekends with little handwritten reminders: farmer's market at 9, laundry before lunch, movie after dinner. Liam used to smile at those notes without realizing they were the invisible threads holding ordinary happiness together. Now the refrigerator door reflected nothing except his own tired face. He buried himself in work, staying later at the office because the apartment no longer felt like home. Colleagues congratulated him on winning an important case, but even the applause sounded strangely distant. One afternoon, his assistant walked into his office carrying a stack of unopened personal mail that had been delivered to the firm by mistake. Among the envelopes sat a large cream-colored package addressed to Ethan. It had been forwarded from their old apartment. Liam hesitated before reading the return address. Evergreen Illustration Studio, Seattle, Washington. His heartbeat quickened. He carefully turned the envelope over and noticed a gold sticker that read, "Welcome to the team." Ethan had not only landed the interview, he had earned the position. Liam smiled for the first time in days, instinctively reaching for his phone to tell Ethan how proud he was. His thumb froze above the screen. He had lost the right to celebrate Ethan's victories long before the acceptance letter arrived. That evening, Liam visited the apartment storage closet searching for an old suitcase, thinking perhaps he could surprise Ethan in Seattle. Instead, he found several flat cardboard boxes neatly labeled in Ethan's handwriting. Sketchbooks, winter decorations, tax records. Beneath them rested another small box Liam had never opened. Curious, he lifted the lid. Inside lay dozens of receipts, bank statements, and folded documents clipped together with colorful paper clips. At first, nothing made sense. Then he recognized his own student loan account number. Month after month, payments had been made from an account that did not belong to him. Smaller deposits at first, then larger ones whenever deadlines approached. Ethan had quietly covered thousands of dollars over the past 2 years without ever mentioning it. Liam searched deeper until he found an email confirmation from an online art auction. Ethan had sold one of his favorite original paintings, the one inspired by the sunrise they watched together in Acadia National Park. Liam remembered begging him never to sell that piece because it was too personal. Ethan had only smiled and changed the subject. Now Liam understood why the painting had disappeared from the apartment wall. It had become another payment toward a debt Liam thought he had handled alone. He sat on the storage room floor surrounded by dusty boxes, holding those papers with trembling hands. Every late night Ethan spent drawing had not been about chasing recognition. Every freelance commission accepted after midnight had not been about ambition. Ethan had quietly sacrificed pieces of his own dream to protect the future they were supposed to build together. Liam closed his eyes as memories returned with unbearable clarity. The forgotten dry cleaning, the canceled dinners, the untouched cake, the interview he barely acknowledged, then the sentence he wished he could erase forever. For months, he had measured Ethan's value by visible achievements while remaining completely blind to the countless acts of love happening quietly beside him every single day. That was the moment regret stopped being an emotion and became a weight he could no longer set down. 3 months passed before Liam finally bought a one-way ticket to Seattle. The flight lasted a little over 6 hours, but every mile felt like another reminder that distance was measured by choices, not geography. He had rehearsed dozens of apologies somewhere above the clouds, yet every version sounded painfully inadequate. How could a few sentences possibly repair months of neglect or erase words that had settled into someone else's heart? The city greeted him with crisp autumn air and streets lined with orange and crimson leaves. Seattle looked peaceful, almost indifferent to the storm Liam carried inside himself. He checked into a small hotel instead of heading directly to Evergreen Illustration Studio. For the first time in years, he understood that showing up did not mean someone owed him a conversation. The next afternoon, he walked slowly toward the studio building, a renovated brick warehouse filled with sunlight pouring through enormous windows. Colorful murals decorated the entrance, and framed artwork covered nearly every wall visible from the lobby. The place felt alive in a way his law office never had. Through the glass partition, Liam spotted Ethan standing beside a large drawing table, laughing with 2 coworkers over something displayed on a computer monitor. The sound reached him only faintly, but it was unmistakable. It was a laugh Liam had not heard in far too long. Ethan looked healthier. His clothes were still simple, but they fit with an easy confidence. His hair was slightly longer, and there was a quiet brightness in his expression that had disappeared during their final months together. Liam suddenly realized something heartbreaking. Ethan had not found happiness because he left Liam. He had found happiness because he had finally stopped shrinking himself for someone who no longer noticed his light. Before Liam could decide whether to leave, Ethan glanced toward the lobby. Their eyes met through the glass. Time seemed to pause. Ethan's smile faded, replaced not by anger but by calm surprise. After excusing himself from his coworkers, He walked toward the reception area with measured steps. Neither of them spoke immediately. They simply stood facing each other while the receptionist politely looked away, sensing a conversation too personal to interrupt. "Hello, Liam," Ethan said quietly. His voice remained gentle, yet there was a new steadiness beneath it. "Hello, Ethan." Liam almost reached out before stopping himself. "You look happy." Ethan smiled politely. "I am doing well." The answer should have comforted Liam, but instead it exposed how little he deserved to hear it. "I found your acceptance letter," Liam admitted. "Congratulations. I should have said that months ago." Ethan nodded with sincere appreciation. "Thank you." Another silence settled between them, lighter than before, but no less significant. Liam searched Ethan's face for traces of the man who once waited patiently for every apology. Instead, he found someone who had learned that peace did not require another person's permission. "I came here because I owe you more than an apology," Liam said softly. Ethan looked at him for several seconds before answering. "I have a lunch break in 15 minutes. There is a small coffee shop across the street." He paused just long enough for hope to flicker inside Liam's chest. "You can tell me what you came to say, but please understand that listening does not mean everything goes back to the way it was." Liam nodded immediately. For the first time since losing Ethan, he realized reconciliation was not something he could ask for. It was something he would have to earn, one honest moment at a time. The coffee shop smelled of roasted beans and fresh cinnamon, the kind of comforting warmth that made difficult conversations feel almost possible. Rain tapped softly against the windows while people around them chatted about ordinary things, completely unaware that two lives were quietly balancing on the edge of a single conversation. Ethan wrapped both hands around a ceramic mug, letting the heat settle into his palms before looking up. "You said you owed me more than an apology," he said calmly. "So tell me why you came." Liam stared at his untouched coffee for several long seconds. For the first time in his life, there were no carefully crafted arguments, no polished speeches, no strategy. Only honesty remained. "I found the receipts," he said quietly. Ethan's expression barely changed. "The loan payments. The painting you sold. Everything you did without ever asking for credit." Ethan lowered his eyes toward the table. "I never wanted credit." "I know," Liam whispered. "That is exactly what broke me." Silence settled between them. Liam took a slow breath, his voice growing unsteady. "I spent years believing I was carrying both of us. I thought I was sacrificing everything for our future. Then I realized you had been sacrificing just as much. Only you never made sure I noticed." Ethan listened without interrupting. He no longer rushed to comfort Liam's guilt the way he once would have. He simply allowed the truth to exist between them. "I kept thinking about that night," Liam continued. "Not because of what I said, because of what I believed when I said it. That is what scares me the most." His hands trembled slightly as he looked directly into Ethan's eyes. "I made you feel invisible while you were the person holding my entire life together." Ethan inhaled slowly before answering. "Do you know what hurt the most?" Liam shook his head. It was not one sentence. It was realizing I had spent months trying to prove I deserved kindness from someone I already loved. Those words landed harder than anything Liam had imagined. He felt his throat tighten as memories flooded back with painful clarity. Ethan waiting beside cold dinners. Ethan smiling through forgotten anniversaries. Ethan celebrating Liam's victories while quietly hiding his own. "I thought if I became more successful," Ethan said softly, "or more patient, or less emotional, maybe you would look at me the way you used to." Liam closed his eyes. "I was wrong about everything." He reached into his coat pocket and carefully unfolded the acceptance letter he had carried with him since leaving New York. The paper had become creased from being opened so many times. "I have read this almost every day," he admitted. "Every time I wondered what kind of person celebrates strangers in court while ignoring the person they love most." His voice cracked despite every effort to stay composed. "The worthless one was never you." Ethan remained silent. Liam swallowed hard, no longer trying to hide the tears gathering in his eyes. "It was me. I was the one who forgot what love actually looked like." A tear finally slipped down his cheek. He did not wipe it away. "I am not asking you to come back with me today. I am not asking you to pretend none of this happened. I only need you to know that I finally understand what I destroyed, and I will regret it for the rest of my life if I never get the chance to become someone worthy of the love you gave me so freely." Ethan looked at him for a long time, his expression gentle but guarded. Outside, the rain continued falling against the windows, and neither of them noticed that their coffee had long since grown cold. Ethan looked down at the quiet ripples in his coffee before speaking. There was a time when hearing those words from you would have been enough. Liam's hopeful expression flickered for only a second before Ethan gently continued. But that version of me does not exist anymore. There was no bitterness in his voice, only honesty earned through months of rebuilding himself one ordinary day at a time. He smiled faintly, almost apologetically. When I first moved here, I kept expecting my phone to ring. Every morning, I thought maybe today you would call. Every evening, I wondered if I had made a mistake by leaving. Liam lowered his head, unable to meet Ethan's eyes. For weeks, I blamed myself for everything, Ethan admitted. I replayed every conversation, every disagreement, every little moment, asking what I could have done differently. I even wondered if maybe you were right. Liam closed his eyes as those words struck him with painful force. Ethan continued quietly. Then something changed. One of the senior artists at the studio asked me to help mentor an intern. I laughed because I thought he had mistaken me for someone more qualified. He looked at me and said something I will never forget. He said, "People who spend their lives lifting others usually forget how much they are carrying themselves." Ethan smiled softly at the memory. It was the first time in a very long while that someone saw me before I had to prove anything. He glanced out the rain-speckled window where pedestrians hurried beneath colorful umbrellas. That was when I started rebuilding my life. Not because I stopped loving you. Because I finally started loving myself enough to stop begging for things that should have been freely given. Liam's hands tightened around the warm mug. "I know I cannot ask you to trust me," he whispered. "You cannot," Ethan agreed gently. "Trust is not rebuilt with promises. It is rebuilt with time." Another quiet silence settled between them, but unlike the silence that had filled their apartment months ago, this one did not feel empty. It felt honest. Liam finally looked up. "Is there anything I can do?" Ethan considered the question carefully before answering. "Yes." Hope returned cautiously to Liam's face. "Stop trying to convince me that you have changed." Liam looked confused. Ethan offered a small, understanding smile. "Become someone who has changed. There is a difference." Those words lingered between them as the rain outside gradually softened into a light drizzle. Ethan stood as his lunch break neared its end and slipped on his light gray jacket. Liam instinctively rose as well. "I am staying in Seattle for a few days," he admitted. "Not to pressure you. I wanted to be honest." Ethan nodded. "Thank you for telling me." He picked up his empty cup and carried it toward the return counter before turning back one last time. "For what it is worth, I believe people can grow. I believe they can become kinder than they used to be." Liam felt his heart lift slightly. Ethan's next sentence, however, grounded that hope in reality. But believing someone can change is very different from deciding they belong in your future. With that, Ethan walked back toward the studio across the street, leaving Liam standing beside the window. He watched as Ethan crossed the crosswalk with quiet confidence, greeting co-workers with an easy smile that reached his eyes. For the first time, Liam understood that loving someone did not mean asking them to return to the version of themselves that had been hurt. Sometimes love meant respecting the stronger person they had become, even if earning a place beside them would take far longer than losing it ever had. The next morning, Liam checked out of his hotel without knowing whether he would ever return to Seattle again. Before leaving, he wrote a short handwritten letter instead of sending another message. He left it with the receptionist at Evergreen Illustration Studio, along with a small envelope containing the original receipt for the painting Ethan had sold years before. Inside the letter, there were no promises, no dramatic declarations, and no requests for another chance. There was only one sentence that mattered. "Thank you for loving me when I had not yet learned how to love someone well." Then he boarded his flight back to New York. Life did not transform overnight. Liam stopped measuring success by the hours he spent at the office and started measuring it by the people who would remember whether he had truly been present. He began declining unnecessary meetings, reconnecting with old friends he had neglected, volunteering on weekends at a neighborhood legal clinic, and calling his parents every Sunday instead of convincing himself he was too busy. None of those changes were performed for an audience. Ethan was not there to witness them. That was precisely the point. Meanwhile, Ethan continued building the life he had almost convinced himself he did not deserve. His illustrations appeared in national magazines. his confidence quietly returned, and his apartment slowly filled with plants, books, and framed artwork that celebrated new memories instead of preserving old wounds. Every now and then he thought about Liam, usually when passing a bakery that displayed chocolate cake in the window or hearing a song they once played during long drives. The memories no longer hurt. They simply reminded him of the person he used to be and how far he had come. Nearly a year after their conversation in Seattle, Ethan attended a small illustration conference in Chicago. During a break between workshops, he stepped into the lobby cafe to order coffee. As he waited, he heard a familiar voice behind him. "I guess we both still choose coffee before lunch." Ethan turned slowly. Liam stood a few feet away, looking surprised rather than prepared. There was no expensive suit this time, only a simple sweater, comfortable jeans, and an easy smile that did not ask for anything. They laughed softly at the coincidence. The conversation that followed felt different from every conversation they had ever shared. There were no defenses to lower, no invisible scorecards, no desperate attempts to erase the past. They spoke about work, favorite books, cities they wanted to visit, and the ordinary details people often overlook until they become precious. When the conference announcement interrupted them, neither rushed to say goodbye. Liam hesitated before speaking. "Would you like to have dinner after the last session?" Ethan studied him quietly, noticing something that had once been impossible to find. Patience. Not the patience of someone waiting for an answer, but the patience of someone willing to accept whatever answer came. Ethan smiled, warm and genuine. "Dinner sounds nice." It was not forgiveness wrapped in a fairy tale ending. It was something quieter and, perhaps, far more meaningful. Two people chose to begin again without pretending yesterday had never happened. As they walked towards separate conference rooms, Ethan glanced back with a small smile. Liam smiled too, but neither reached for the other's hand. Some stories do not end with dramatic speeches or perfect certainty. Sometimes the happiest ending begins with two people finally understanding that love is never proven by how tightly you hold on. It is proven by becoming the kind of person another heart can safely choose, day after day, all over again.